Hey everyone, welcome to another 40k Friday painting tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to paint Grey Knight Purifiers using the new Citadel Paint Range. I began by removing all of the applicable parts from the plastic sprues. Then using a sharp hobby knife, I carefully removed all the mold lines. I also added some additional detail by drilling out the barrels of all of the guns. You'll also notice that unlike my previous Purifier tutorial, I actually built all of the models except for their heads on the bodies before painting. I primed all of the models using Vallejo Air Model Air Gray Primer. Then using an airbrush, I base coated all of them using Leadbelcher metallic paint. This is the perfect base color and will slowly build up lighter colors of silver on the armor. I then started on all the force weapons by painting a gradient. I'm going to be painting a gradient from lightness on the top to darkness on the bottom, starting with white. I use Ceremite white, but feel free to use white Scars white since they'll appear the same on the halberds. I then painted a gradient through Lothern blue, then Caledon sky, and finally to a 1-to-1 mix of Kaldor blue to Abaddon black. I then applied some pre-shading with a 1-to-1 mix of Abaddon black to Leadbelcher. I specifically targeted the areas that wouldn't be showing the light, so specifically under the legs, in the cracks of the armor, and under the backpack. I then gave all of the armor a Drakenhof Nightshade, which will act almost like a black wash and get in all the recesses, but give it a slight more bluish tinge as opposed to the black tinge. This shading will also provide some nice detail in the armor and give it a little bit more worn of an appearance. When the wash was dried, I Drybrush all of the armor using Ironbreaker. I specifically focused on the areas, once again, that would be more available to the light to produce a nice gradient. Of the areas where the light hit would be Ironbreaker, and the recesses and the parts where the wouldn't hit would be the Leadbelcher. This process was also repeated on the hammers, the metallics on the guns, and and all the armor parts. I then gave the armor one more very light dry brush using Necron compound. Once again, just focusing on the very top parts of the armor to produce a really nice gradient of silvers on the armor. Finally, to protect the armor, as these metallics tend to be worn very easily during the painting process, I applied a satin varnish to all of the metallic areas. I then painted all the red areas, specifically the emblems of the purity seals, the books, and the side cannons Wazdakka red, which will act as a deep red dark base color, which we'll go over later with a more bright red color. Therefore, the obvious next step was to highlight all of these areas, specifically an edge highlight with Mephiston red, which is a nice bright red which will make the reds really pop. I then painted all the purity seals, the banners, and the book pages using Zandri dust. I highlighted all of these areas using Ushabti bone. I'm sorry if my pronunciation was bad on it, but it's a very hard word to pronounce. When painting these parts, it's okay to leave a little bit of brush strokes, as when you go over it with the wash in just a moment where I'll show you, it tends to actually make them give a more worn appearance, and gives them a little bit more detail. Therefore, to bring out the nice details in all these areas, I gave them all an Agrax Earthshade, which will get into the recesses and a little bit of the brush marks and give it a nice worn appearance on all of these parts. Next, I turned my attention to the gold areas by giving them all the base color Balthasar gold. I'm a really big fan of the new Balthasar gold. It goes on really easy with a single coat and gives a really nice base color to all of these really nice gold areas. I applied this base coat to all the lettering, the skulls, as well as the shoulder pads and the halberds and any jewels that were hanging from their armor. My only recommendation is be careful when going over the lettering. You don't want to give it too deep of a coat, because then it'll kind of muck up the lettering and make it harder to read. I then gave all these gold areas a black-brown shading, which is a 1-to-1 mix of Nuln oil to Agrax Earthshade. This will get in all the recesses and darken a lot, especially making the letters much more legible and giving the gold an old, dirtier appearance. When the wash dried, I highlighted all these gold areas with Gehenna's gold, one of the really nice new gold colors from Citadel, which is a really nice warm reddish gold. It goes really nicely on these Grey Knights, I find. And finally, I gave all these gold areas one more very, very light edge highlight along the areas where the light would hit with Auric Armor Gold. This makes the gold areas slightly more brighter and creates a really nice lighting effect on all the gold areas. I painted the guns, the handles on the Force Halberds, the gaps in the armor, and the vents in his backpack, Abaddon black. I then did an edge highlight on all of these areas, well, specifically the guns, the vents, and the gaps in the armor, using Administratum Gray. I then base coated the helmets and the shoulder pads Ceremite White. If you don't have Ceremite White, you can also use white scars, though you'll probably have to use a little bit more. I really like the Ceremite White because it goes on with one single coat and provides a great bright white on all the parts. I then gave all these white areas a shading. Use a watered down Nuln oil shade. This Nuln oil shading will get in all the recesses and give all these areas much more detail, especially the helmets, and also give them an older, worn down appearance. When the washes were dry, I gave them several dry brushes, actually, with Praxeti White, the new dry white color. Once again, if you don't have Praxeti White, you can use white scars. And just doing very, very small highlights at a time, you can build up a lot of layers of white on these helmets. Just make sure to keep the darkness in the recesses. And in the end, you get helmets that look really nice, but still have a worn quality to them. I then used white scars and layered up very, very thin layers of white scars on the shoulder pads, keeping the recesses shaded. Remember to use very thin layers and do a little bit at a time and just build up the brightness of the whites, because that way you prevent your brush strokes from showing on the armor and a really chalky appearance. I painted the eyes first with Lothern blue, and then I went over just the centers with a 1-to-1 mix of Lothern blue to white scars. I then gave these eyes a watered-down Drakenhof Nightshade, trying to keep the shading specifically in the around the perimeter of the eye, which will give it a nice deep look to them and produce a little bit of a kind of a glowing effect in the center of the eyes. And finally, I painted all the wiring Caledon Sky. It's actually one of my new favorite blues of the new Citadel range. And that's it. You now know how I painted up my Purifier squad using the new Citadel Paint Range. I used a very similar basing style to my other basing tutorials. If you want to know how I did it, just check out my basing tutorials. Overall, I'm really happy with how they turned out. I think they turned out really nicely. I love these new Citadel paints, and I love the Purifiers, so it's a great combination. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this Citadel painting tutorial. So as always, thank you to all you people out there for watching my videos. You keep me motivated, and I really hope you like my new style of doing a tutorial every Friday for 40K. Please like the video, leave any comments, in the comments section and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so. Feel free to leave comments about which more 40k tutorials you'd like me to do in the future as well. I'm definitely open to taking more suggestions. So this is Jay, and saying till next time, happy painting everyone.